And we are live, everyone. We've got a pretty interesting show for today. Yeah, I nearly avoided a shooting last night. We were just talking about behind the scenes.
American things.
Very normal American things. Yeah, no, I was down. I was downtown, hanging out with some friends, and I was at a bar, and shortly after I had left, maybe like 30 minutes after I had left, basically, I hear like 15 gunshots going off. I was at a different place down the street, and yeah, and then I find out that one person got killed basically today. And, yeah, so that was a good way to kind of end my Saturday night, I guess.
Happy wedding, right?
Yeah. But other than that, the wedding I went to was fine. Everything else was great. It was a good weekend.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. So today we're going to be talking about, we're going to be having Amanda Levi on to talk about her new article in Cosmonaut about the split in the European left. Let me send her the link to get her on stream. Then I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with MAGA and Israel, as well as some of these encampments that have sprung up as well. And then I think we should talk about this new Kanye or Ye song that is unfortunately this mental virus that has been unleashed upon our culture that is unfortunately
the oral equivalent of syphilis.
Yeah, basically that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, it's very weird. Yeah.
We're living in a bizarre time.
Yeah, I'm telling you, every day.
The leading Nazi in America is a black man. Someone wake up Adolf.
Yeah, I know, man. There's a black Adolf, but like it's.
Well, he did have the song "Black Skinhead,"
Wow.
Yeah, I actually like that song.
It's an amazing song.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, it is.
No.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna post this in the Discord and let everyone know we're live. Live now. So it seems like this war between Pakistan and India was supposed to cool down, but it seems like that's not what's happening.
Did they not sign a ceasefire?
Well, yeah, no. Trump was. I guess he said he negotiated a ceasefire, but it doesn't seem to be holding. That's the last I heard. So that's concerning.
This stuff happens pretty regularly, though, right?
Well, no, it's not the first war between India and Pakistan. That's the thing. So a lot of people were kind of saying, "Oh, this is a nothing burger. Don't get freaked out too much about this." But I mean, people were saying that about the Ukraine war, and
that's not false. I mean, if it does happen, it's a disaster because it's two nuclearly armed powers.
Right. I mean, it is possible though that they could go to war and not use nukes. Right. Like that's not crazy to think, right?
It's certainly a possibility.
I think the danger is de-escalation, but I also think that the international situation or the context is different in light of inter-imperialist wars becoming more frequent.
Right. I guess that's the danger is if they start using tactical nukes and then it heats up from there, and then other other imperialist powers get involved. All right, we got Amanda ready to join us. So we're going to hear a bit about something that's going on in the European left that not many people are talking about. Hey, Amanda, thanks for joining us.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. Okay, because I've been having some problems recently with this microphone, so that's good to hear.
Yeah, definitely. So you are from Poland, which is a very interesting country to be a communist, and
well, and I wouldn't say interesting. It's kind of not interesting because there is not much happening.
Right. So and what's the org that you're in for our audience?
So I'm in a couple of organizations. I'm a member of Akcja Socjalistyczna's political council. That's our small socialist organization, somewhat small. We're still
Somewhat small. Oh, I guess by
well.
Polish socialist standards, maybe.
No, by socialist by Polish standards, it's quite big, but
Right.
it's Poland we're talking about. But I'm also a member of the Razem party. I joined late last year. I'm
Okay, I
also a
did not know
member of
that.
the
I did not
youth,
know you
I
joined
guess. Yeah, I joined. Yes, so
that. Okay.
I guess the article mentions the party a couple of times. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So could you break down those two parties for us? What they signify?
Well, AS is not a party. We're just an organization that we don't think that we don't consider there to be any like real party, socialist party in Poland. So the main task currently is to struggle within the existing socialist movement to build a party like that. And Razem is more of like a sort of left populist party that is actually a party. It's competing in elections. It was in a coalition with like the sort of left liberal Nowa Lewica party, but they split last year, and I joined because of that, because now they're like the main like opposition party or main opposition force really
Right.
on the left in Poland.
So are they
So
kind of? Yeah. Sorry, Donald.
oh, sorry. I was gonna say. So it seems like I'm not gonna try to butcher the pronunciation of AK. I'll just gonna say AK if that's fine. But
AS.
yes, sorry. Oh, I don't know. Even worse. Even worse. But that seems kind of like DSA basically, and that's kind of
Kind of. It is quite similar. And I remember when I joined in 2021, I think I was like, oh, this is kind of similar to DSA.
yeah. It's like we're not exactly a party, but we're like for forming a party. But then like I don't know. It's
I would say that the difference is that it's smaller.
right.
DSA is like way bigger, and though that being said, it's also like a lot more closely politically, at least, aligned with Marxist Unity Group.
Right.
But like its kind of organizational position on the left is kind of similar to DSA. Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool.
And is the official quote unquote left opposition, are they sort of like European style left populists like a Podemos or a Denenke or
you mean Razem?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So they are. So they formed in 2015, and they are quite similar to Podemos because that was one of the main inspirations back then. But I guess I would say they kind of drifted from that image there. But yeah, they're very much in that sort of style of like left populist, not quite socialist. It's like there isn't anything like socialist in the program, or they don't even call itself that. But it's also like just I would say there is quite a big difference when it comes to like organizational structure from like a traditional sort of European leftist party, and yeah, so they're much more. At least in concept, they're much more of like an activist sort of party, not really, not really like a traditional workers' party, really.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So before we talk about the kind of Euro left thing, and because I think it would be good to kind of just go over like what exactly like the kind of purpose of these Euro left parties in the EU is, like what exactly is like the political situation in Poland right now, like what are like the kind of big live political issues that like the left is kind of like interested in.
You mean Poland or Europe? Because if we're talking about
Poland in specific.
okay, Poland specifically. I mean, currently there is a presidential campaign. The elections is actually, yeah, next week. Next in exactly a week, actually, and so Razem is like quite involved in that, obviously. Mm, the presidential candidate Adrian Zandberg is like doing quite well in polls. But other than that, so Razem is basically like laser focused on the one thing currently, and they are having a lot of successes because of it, because they're having like basically free publicity, or not free. I mean, they're spending a lot of money on the campaign, but yeah, they got a lot of publicity, and then like the sort of extra parliamentary left is more focused on, I would say, housing,
Right.
and that's probably like the biggest issue currently in Poland.
It's a big issue here as well, honestly.
Yeah, throughout Europe, honestly. I mean, that's probably like the biggest like crisis of our current age, because it's just gone so wild in so many countries that we don't even have like a sort of normal country to point to.
Right.
But yeah, so that's one of the focuses. But I would say, in general, the extra parliamentary left is very sort of economistic.
So it goes.
Yeah. They focus a lot on like workers' issues and organizing for like better conditions in like individual workplaces. And then Razem is kind of also economistic, but in the opposite way, where they're just yeah, they're just like advocating for their specific policies. They are entirely basically just they're basically like a wish list for the state, which I would say like the vast majority of those demands are cool and good, and I wish they were implemented. But the problem is they're not really. They don't really go beyond that, and I would also say, and maybe this kind of connects with the main subject at hand. There isn't really a good conception of what would happen if power or like won an election, even if that happened, which is unlikely, because I mean the party spent the last year or so like barely getting like 3% in polls. Now they're getting like 5%, but they're like close to the threshold, and that's considered a very good result. So
Right.
Yeah, so it's unlikely that they will get into power, but like there isn't.
So it's kind of like Die Linke then. It's like just having like a minority opposition left party, I guess.
It is kind of similar, but at the same time, I would say that there's a lot of differences. First of all, Die Linke is more of a it's definitely further to the left. There is also more open dialogue inside of the party. There's actually a lot of infighting, just straight up infighting. Like there's people like calling each other extreme
In
things.
Dilinka or in Razem?
In Dilinka.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, no, I
But
did know that there was like some internal feuds over Israel and stuff recently, actually.
yeah.
Which is good to know that people are like pushing back against that.
But yeah, but in
I-
general, I think there's
I
also
think-
a stronger push by the left of Daninka, which is pretty funny to say, the left of the left,
Yeah.
in order to kind of like, well, I mean, basically push something more radical, more appealing. And
Yeah, I think there actually today, or yesterday, I don't remember which, but there was like a convention of like a national convention or federal convention of Dalinka, and they approved of like redefining their internal definition of anti-Semitism to be basically accepting the I
Yeah,
think
it's like the
Jerusalem. Yeah. So
which is
there's
better than the IHRA one.
yeah. So there's like some positive developments there, but also I mean the party there is a lot more of like a vivid internal life to the party, and also let's not forget that Dalinka has like 120,000 members. If I might
Right.
be a couple of thousand off, but whatever, somewhere along those lines. Whereas Razem has, optimistically, it has 3,000 members. Probably a lot less, but in general, Polish politics is very well. The Polish population is very depoliticized. So even like the ruling parties have like really like just a couple of thousand active members, and they're basically all somehow in some way like involved in like the state. So like they all have like some job in the state, so they're essentially like, you cannot really consider them separate from the state. They're just like a wing of the state.
Yeah.
Basically being in the party is their job, and their job is the party. So one question I actually had was, my feeling is that from the little that I know about Polish politics, there's a strong anti-socialist sentiment, and that's very much linked to a Polish nationalism, which is angry about the involvement of the Soviets in the country, pre and post World War II. So I'm kind of wondering, how does that play out? How does that anti-Soviet legacy play out today? And what is the general state of the Polish people and their sort of ideas on socialism? Like, if you say socialist, do people just turn off and think you're an evil Russian trying to take over the country? Or
there's certainly a lot of those people. Though that being said, like for example, the presidential candidate of Razem, Adrian Zandberg, he I I have to like watch out because I keep not switching between accents. And so, for example, I said Zandberg in an English accent. So I keep doing that when switching between languages. No, but he calls himself like a market socialist or whatever. But it's not very public. But like he's said it a couple of times, and so it's somewhat acceptable. But you have to like basically launder it a bunch to
qualify yourself.
Yeah, you have to basically say that, yeah, I'm a socialist, but basically just like distance yourself from the Polish People's Republic, and that kind of model of politics, which I think like I have no problem with doing that myself. So I think that it was just plainly not democratic. And also, like, as a Jewish person, there's a lot of like very quirky, let's say, history regarding the Polish
Yeah.
Jewish relations in the Polish People's Republic.
Yeah, no,
Like,
the leadership of the Polish People's Republic was pretty rotten, honestly. Nothing I've read about it. Like, it seemed like the censorship in the arts was a little less bad in some cases. Like, they did have like some like less strict censorship in some cases, but like, I don't know.
yeah.
Like, they did have like jazz and like psychedelic rock and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
but
I mean, I'm sure that there was anti-Semitism because from what I know about Poland, that's the stereotype that anti-Semitism is like a national sport. So,
well, like my understanding is like basically after the war, because like so many of like the actual true believer communists had been like purged or killed by either purged by Stalin or killed in the war by the Nazis, that basically like you just had self-serving like bureaucrats kind of like take up the post as leaders of the communists or whatever. And
so just like a lot of backwards elements in the party.
so a lot of national chauvinism basically becomes
Yeah.
Would
And
you say that's accurate? Would you say that's an accurate assessment, Amanda?
Yes. And there is also like, just again, going back to the point where the Polish society is not very politicized. It's partly due to the fact that that leadership had a very sort of technocratic conception of governance.
Right.
And that goes back even further. I mean, you could talk about like the partitions, how that impacted the Polish society. But yeah, I think that's there was a lot of like just really undemocratic sort of attitudes within the party and within the society, and so that kind of blends with reactionary politics. Sort of related to that is that we currently have this presidential campaign, and one of the contestants is a guy called Grzegorz Braun, and he's not very cool with regards to Jews. He's basically like explicitly like, well, you could say that he's explicitly calling for the Jews to be quote unquote gassed, because his whole like logo is like a fire extinguisher.
Yeah, is he the guy that like with the fire extinguisher thing like went into like the I saw it. That was pretty disturbing.
Yeah, so he's a presidential candidate. He has like around like 3 to 4% in elections in the polls. So
wow, that's
and he's in the European Parliament too. Like, he's a parliamentarian.
Is he aligned? So I'm guessing, is he kind of aligned with the right-wing international in Europe? That is, Le Pen or
no. He's way too. He's to the right.
Wow. Okay. Well,
he's too anti-Semitic because a lot of those people are philo-Semites.
Yeah, but they're philo-Semites and anti-Semites at the same time.
Yeah, you're right. It's the right. People have there's no consistency in logical positions here.
Anyways, one thing I was also wondering is, one, how has Poland kind of responded to the war in Ukraine, and how is that playing out in the presidential election?
I don't think it's talked about that much. Honestly, it's kind of died out in the last, I mean, during the course of the war. There was a lot of like just pro-Ukrainian sentiment. I mean, which honestly, like at the start of the war, that was like pretty good, because there was like over 1 million of Ukrainian immigrants in the country, and broadly speaking, everyone was on board with like helping them out and accepting them.
Yeah.
But like in the last year or so, it's honestly like switched, like from like this sort of like solidarity and acceptance of the immigrants to now there's like a lot of tensions and like a lot of like hatred towards the immigrants. When it comes to the actual war, I would say it's not really. I mean, pretty much every candidate is on board with like helping Ukraine, um, which includes sending weapons to Ukraine. There's some like fringe candidates who are basically kind of like um, irrelevant, and there is this one candidate who's like directly saying that he thinks that Putin is like a great leader or something, but like he's not gonna get any votes.
Yeah, I can't see someone who's like openly pro Putin getting very far in Poland.
Right. And I mean the right wing is sort of like, I mean some of them are like indirectly funded by Russia, and so there is this tendency to call them like Russian infiltrators. But really, I think the subject was like way more important to people like a year ago or 2 years ago, and now it's like kind of like maybe like tertiary or something.
Right.
It's not on people's minds as much.
I mean, hardly
Well, the war
surprising.
has just dragged on.
Yeah, it's
Mm.
dragged on. It's pretty clear
And it's
that
just
it's
been
not
like
gonna-
trench warfare with little, like, it's just it's
Yeah, and
almost
it's not,
stagnant trench warfare.
and it's not as if like the initial kind of unreasonable fears that like Russia would spill over and like march on Germany, or it's not even a remote possibility for any reasonable person at this point.
I think what also changed the sort of situation is that, I mean, I remember last year when AS we published a statement on NATO, like calling it was titled "No to NATO," and everyone was like incredibly pissed. And then like a couple of months later, Trump got elected, and everyone's like, "Yeah, they were correct." um, they won't say it, but like there is a lot of like disillusionment with regards to NATO, and just like there's that's being replaced by a lot of like at least on the left, with a lot of like calls, or not a lot, but some calls to like basically integrate within Europe.
Right.
And again, that kind of connects to the main subject. We're kind of
Right. I was going to
of the
say that's
subject, but
a good lead into the article we want to talk about.
yeah, but some people on the left are calling for more integration within Europe and like for a unified army or something. But it's not been like really nobody's campaigned on it. Nobody's like really made a big fuss about it, and there isn't really like any concrete plans about it. So it's kind of just something that some people talk about.
Right. All right. So let me bring up the article actually, just so people have a visual cue. So yes, why do we need European left unity? So basically, there is the EU Parliament, right? And the PEL is the party of the European left. And
Well, I already have to clarify. This isn't PEL isn't really a parliamentary grouping.
okay.
So maybe it's like important to distinguish between the European parliamentary groupings and European parties. Because
Right.
yeah, one of them is like entirely just parliamentary, and they're basically like groups of parties, of national parties, which join together in the parliament to like basically vote as a bloc. But it's it's a lot more vague, and it's entirely focused on the parliamentarians. You cannot really join like so the left group is the left, it's called the left in the European Parliament, and you cannot really join it. You cannot really do it. Like, it's not like a membership based group. It's just the parliamentarians, I guess, plus their staff. Um, but and on that level, the left is like mostly like unified still. There's a couple of parties which aren't in the left in the European Parliament, but when if we're talking about the parties mentioned in this article, then yeah, they're pretty much all either inside of this group, or they're outside of the European Parliament. But the Euro parties are like they're kind of weird because I think I should maybe clarify. I'm not like a specialist in this subject. I've just read a bunch of like books.
Well, and that's
And
that's everyone.
yeah, I've just read a couple of books about this, and also I've been at a couple of like international like events, like European events.
Oh yeah, it says you're part of the European Left Youth Network, which is it's a working group of the PEO.
It's kind of um, it's not really active currently. Let's just
Okay,
say.
yeah.
But
Is that,
maybe I'll get to it. But first, explain. I should finish explaining what the Euro parties are. So they were basically formed around like the early 2000s. I think the Party of the European Left specifically was formed in 2004. So that was when the like biggest wave of like European integration happened. A bunch of countries joined, um, and yeah, and and basically the European Union decided to, in the spirit of like fostering like actual integration, they decided to establish this sort of entity, like legal entity, that was the European Party. And so parties which are represented in the European Parliament can join together to form like a bigger party, and that party can then get funding directly from the European Union. And so that's why every single like parliamentary group also has a sort of Euro party, and or a couple of them in the case of the left now. But and I think you have to have like six parties, or parties from 6 countries in your Euro party, that are also in the European Parliament or represented in the European Parliament, to receive any funding. And right now, I think both of the leftist parties are around like I think 6 or 7. I would have to count, but anyway, they're like very close to the threshold, which wasn't the case previously. And so yeah, so the the Party of the European Left split last year to form so the split formed is called the Europe. Jesus Christ, the name is like it's so infuriating because they're all like the names are so similar. The group is called the Left in the European Parliament. The old Euro party is called the Party of the European Left, and the new Euro party is called a European Left Alliance. And I think like the
Yeah,
subtitle
someone
is
put it
EU
out
Web
in
Planet.
territory.
So it's exactly the same name. They didn't like try. But yeah, so they split, and yeah. Sorry, what was the question? Because I think I was trying to explain the.
No, I think that gives some explanation of like what the Euro parties are. I think like for our American listeners, I think honestly like just an explanation of what the EU Parliament is and what it does could be useful.
Oh.
Because does it really even have any sovereign power?
It does, but it kind of shares it, so it's not sovereign, I guess, if it shares it with other institutions.
Right.
It has some power, but it's not like not very clearly not enough, and it also shares its like level of position with the European Council. Like it's basically the lower house, whereas the European Council is upper house. And the European Council is basically just all the states with like a single delegate. And there's also like a bunch of different institutions that basically aren't directly elected.
Right. So
Yes,
it's
with
kind of
those,
like the Senate and the Supreme Court and all that stuff.
yeah. There is a bunch of like just bureaucratic sort of unelected positions, which actually they're the ones that actually govern the union. But and there is also like a very weird mismatch between like, and honestly it's on some levels it's kind of vague where like the sort of union level can impose its will on like national countries. So that's also like a where some conflicts arise.
Right.
Well, certainly in terms of monetary policy and labor law, the EU is pretty powerful.
Yeah. It is pretty powerful, but at the same time, the actual like elected institutions aren't that powerful.
Yeah, no, that's for
It's
sure.
more of like just different international organizations that are sort of like working within the EU.
Right. Somebody actually asked a question.
What books would you
books would you
recommend on the
recommend?
subject? What do you mean specifically, as in like sort of the formation of the E EU?
Okay, so I'm actually quite critical of most of the stuff I've read. I've read like a book. I don't remember the title or the author really, but like years ago about like the European Union, like from like a more institutional background. But at the same time, that's honestly you could just read Wikipedia on that. It wasn't very good, and it was more of a pamphlet. And then I've recently read 2 books by Jack Conrad. They were written around like 2003, 2004, and they're British, so they haven't aged that well because, I mean, Brexit happened, so it's not a very good source. I mean, it is a good source with regards to like some theoretical considerations, and also like he mostly honestly talks about the 19th century anyway, because that's what Jack Conrad does. But
Yep, that's Jack.
yeah. But I wouldn't say it's really you wouldn't learn that much about the EU itself, I guess.
I think maybe Perry Anderson has some stuff on the EU.
Well, there's a typical kind of story about the EU evolving out of economic unions like steel unions and stuff like that, in Germany and et cetera, but it's true that there's not a really like a definitive sort of left history of the institutional formation of the EU. I know, I mean, in terms of like, I don't know if you're like, you're probably aware, Calvert, but for some other viewers, like if you want to have a good sense of sort of the ideological evolution of the left wing in Europe, I think starting with like Chantal Mouffe and Ernesto Laclau is pretty important. There's a very good kind of criticism of that sort of like left populism by Ellen Meskins Wood. A book called Retreat from Class. It's very good. But people like Mélenchon, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, and Iglesias in Spain, they very much see themselves or model themselves off, Chantal Mouffe and Ernesto Laclau and their thought. Like they very much see themselves sort of as like applying this social philosophy that had been developed, which, actually Mélenchon, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, apparently just his new book, Now the People, Revolution in the 21st Century, was published by Verso, or translated and published by Verso. So I have to look into that and see what he's thinking these days. But yeah, I mean, ideologically, at least, that's, I think, a good starting place for understanding the left wing and ideological evolution.
I would also say that with regards to Europe, there hasn't been that much like thought put into it and that was kind of the main point of the article, is that there isn't enough focus on the European level. It's just kind of left to itself.
Right.
It's treated as an afterthought, whereas I think it should be probably the main subject we should be talking about in Europe, like long term.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think, I feel like, and that actually relates to what you were saying about like Laclau and Move, how like some of these left populists, they kind of do have like a national horizon with their politics.
Yeah.
So they don't really focus on the need for European integration, basically.
They don't really, yeah, everything is more or less domestic for them. And international politics, I mean, as much as, domestic politics is where you first start fighting things out, that's fine, but they don't seem to have a very strong international perspective at all, or strategy for that matter.
So in your article, you kind of say that like one of the points of disagreements in the split was like supposedly Ukraine.
No.
But you argue that this doesn't really make sense if you look at the actual compositions of the split and the positions taken by the different parties. So could you kind of go into like what went down and like what you think are like the real like kind of like issues at play in the split? And
okay, so I think the people who came up with this argument were kind of searching for arguments to split over, because to make it seem like it was more profound and like theoretical, because I really do believe that there is a lot more difference in between inside of the Euro parties than there is between the Euro parties. You have I would say most of the parties within the party of the European left currently, after the split, have a more sort of like old school pacifist attitude towards a lot of things, but yeah, the war in Ukraine is one of those things. Whereas there's a bunch of parties within the ELA, the new group, that are more, they are vocal about sending arms to Ukraine and stuff like that. But then there's also Podemos in the new group, which is I think I saw like 2 days ago on Twitter someone was accusing them of being like Russian puppets. Like it's it really doesn't make sense, and it's very clear to me that that was not the actual issue at hand. There was also like um, some people argue that it was more of like a left-right split, and again, it really wasn't, because well, first of all, Party of the European Left still has Syriza in it, whereas um, the La France Insoumise, they weren't, and they were just observers for a couple of years, but they became observers after they left of like the main body of the Party of the European Left, over the fact that the party was supporting the Syriza government in 2018. So they were actually like to the left. They split because they were to the left of the Party of the European Left. And also there is a bunch of parties like the Red Green Alliance of Denmark, which is like, I mean, way to the left of most of those parties. And but that being said, there's also Razem, which is, I would say, probably the most right wing of all of those parties. At least like the big parties. There's some tiny parties involved that probably like, I mean, Razem is not that big either, but like, you know, like parties with parliamentary representation. So it really doesn't make sense. This sort of argument, and I think they mostly split over the sort of unaccountability of some of the decision making in the Party of the European Left, because it really isn't a functional organization. I describe some of these like aspects in more detail in the article, but like to sum up, and there's basically a bunch of like institutions like for example veto power for like any member of like any vote, and so that's actually like directly imported from the structure of the European Union, because they also have like veto powers there in the European Council. So like they are actually like imitating the sort of bourgeois apparatus. And I would say also like one of the big differences between the Party of the European Left after the split and the European Left Alliance is that most of the parties in the European Left Alliance are more, I guess, internally vivid, because there is a bunch of parties in the PEL which are like sort of post-Euro communist, or yeah, they've been around for 100 years and they haven't really changed, and they have like a very strange structure mechanisms. Like one of the one of the funny things is that PL has both Spanish Communist Party and also Izquierda Unida, which is basically the same thing, but it's like it's their like front group, which also has another front group, which is Sumar. So like there's a couple of levels of front groups at this point, and the two of them are on the same level in the party. But yeah, and there's also like some of the people there are kind of hostile to I can imagine that they would be hostile to some of the I guess it's more of like a power struggle. more or
Yeah.
less. And I kind of sympathize on that level with ELA because, or I sympathize more because really it is kind of like a inactive kind of internally dead structure.
Right.
And it basically only that's one thing that I didn't mention. The European parties don't really have any sort of like really, they aren't really necessary. Like they're kind of pointless. Um, so the PEL mostly focuses on like publishing stuff on social media and then doing like 2 like international events every year. So like 2 meetings basically. And that's about it. Um, and so like it's basically just like a tool for conferences, which isn't very
Right.
useful. And when you have people who aren't very responsive organizing those conferences, then those conferences aren't useful at all. And so as I sympathize with ELA, but on the other hand, they don't really seem to be building an alternative because I mean the organization was founded like almost a year ago. Well, no, that was September, but over half a year ago,
Yeah.
and they still don't have a website. They don't have social media. They haven't done anything to my knowledge, like any meetings. They haven't built a structure. All of the links to their like um, uh, I guess political platform, which really was just like a list of like moral principles that was really vague and also would be completely acceptable by any sort of left party. So it wasn't like distinguishing themselves. Um, yeah, all of the links to that are dead, so it's gone. I think I don't know. I cannot find it anymore. So
Yeah. So
there's basically
it just
no
seems like,
trace.
well, it seems like they kind of had an infrastructure there to build something European wide, but it wasn't really working, and so people were frustrated, so they just kind of split. But now the split isn't really building anything either, so it's just
Mm.
it's kind of depressing.
It is really depressing, but at the same time, I think that none of the people involved really have a perspective. Like
Or a vision.
right. I do really think that there's a lack of vision there. It's not um it's not that they're like completely inactive in politics, obviously, because they're like very active in national politics. But
Right.
I guess, yeah, if I had the same politics as the people who are behind those organizations, then yeah, I also wouldn't care about the European Party because it's like, why do you even need it at that point? Because you're obviously just gonna like climb in polls nationally, and so like you only need the European parties to have like some like conferences every now and then to have like cool photo shoots and
Right.
like to
Right.
maybe organize something for the European elections. Um, but even then, that it's mostly just like to have like a tiny logo on under your like poster, and that's about it. There is no real effort to organize it into an actual party, and I do believe that. I mean, the last decade really showed, at least in my eyes, that there really needs to be that you cannot really have a national left government in Europe.
Right. That's what I was going to say. Like, what would your sales pitch kind of be to these people that why we
Right.
need, to have a European wide left, basically?
Yeah. So first with Syriza, but then a bunch of other examples. Like those governments basically are impossible to maintain, and if they are maintained, then they become like the opposite of what they were striving to form. So and that's mostly due to the sort of international pressure of like yeah, those institutions like the European Commission, and then like the banks and whatnot. And also like something that I don't think is talked about as much, the sort of just almost automatic capital flight that happens every time any sort of even left-leaning politician is elected. Like, for God's sake, Keir Starmer was elected like last year, and they still had a capital flight there. It was honestly like, you really have to like take that into consideration when talking about politics in Europe, because that's not just like possibility that could happen. That will definitely happen if you take over without preparing yourself first. And so really, I don't see, unless you're planning to do like a complete autarky where you're just like cutting your borders and closing your borders and just like cutting any contact with the outside world, you are gonna have to like get involved in European politics. And I do believe that if the left, even if our horizon is really just like a bunch of like sort of like a list of demand, like good things to implement within the bourgeois order, you cannot really do that within the current order. Like, those reforms are not really possible unless you actually tackle the entire structure on a European level. And I don't think that should be the horizon. I'm just saying that even that if that is your horizon is basically impossible to
Right.
achieve nationally.
But unfortunately, also capital can fly not just from Europe to other European countries. It can fly to the U.S.
Right.
Capital can also fly now to Hong Kong, Macau. It can fly to a lot of different places, right? So,
I mean, in light of those difficulties, it makes sense why, for example, certain parts of the left in the UK were advocating for Brexit, in the sense that they think that their job would have been made easier without being restrained by the institutions of the EU.
But they are still restrained by them. It's just that,
Right.
I mean, yeah, the sort of autarky situation didn't happen. Britain is still like very interconnected with the outside world. So the only thing that really happened is that the British population doesn't have a direct say in the European Parliament and the European Council and all of those organizations. They still have like a indirect say through like economic measures and through diplomacy. So that happened, and also it made it much more difficult to organize cross-boundary, which is actually like the main problem here. It's difficult to overstate how much like free like how much the sort of like travel
The
free
free
travel,
movement.
yeah, the free movement, yeah, between countries is like positive for the left,
Right.
because I mean the bourgeois can always travel, but the workers actually have to like it's very difficult to travel between countries. And
Yeah.
once you actually already have that structure in, I think it's honestly asinine to argue against it. And
Yeah.
Especially in light of like how easily capital can move, because capital has no restraints.
listen,
And like
capital can move, but workers have to stay locked in. That's just
Right.
how it is.
But like, I mean, the slogan itself isn't "Workers of the world, stay in your own countries and like do your own stuff." It's unite, right? And like, I don't think I'm sure some people actually treat it as just like a nice sounding slogan, but I do think that's like an actual policy or strategic take, and it's a very good one at that. Um, um, yeah, and maybe to go back to the question, I think what we really need right now is, first of all, a European Workers' Party that would have like a good program and all of that. But honestly, like currently, even if the Euro parties got their shit together, that would still be an improvement. Um, I would much rather have like a unified reformist party in Europe than not have it. Because I mean, one of the problems is that all of those like national parties are always gonna be like a pole of attraction to activists. So like what I saw some comments under my article talking about how why should we even care about those parties? They're like reformist and stuff, and like they're no good. And
Right.
the problem is that you can't really like avoid engaging with them in Europe.
Right. Right.
People tried a bunch of times. Like most recently, I guess most recently the IMT tried to had their partyist turn, and they tried to like form a bunch of parties in all of the countries in Europe. None of those parties really broke through, and they're basically just the same sect. They haven't like broken through the sort of sect level politics.
Oh, IMT.
But also like more mainstream sort of politicians. Like for example, a good example would actually be Yanis Varoufakis. He's from DM25, and he's doing his own international, like his own like European uh, Euro party. Except like for example, they established a party in Germany, and they participated in elections, and in the last election they got like 7,000 votes.
Yeah, they did not get anywhere at all.
Right?
They did even worse than the kind of like kind of right wing socialist split from Die Linke.
Oh no, I mean that was a sort of mainstream party.
Yeah.
They actually they still have like European parliamentary representation, because the European elections was before then. So they actually are. That's kind of the difference, though. They actually were involved in the sort of in politics, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I think just trying to establish something on your own is kind of just avoiding the issue altogether, and it's just
Right.
hiding your head in the sand. It's not really. Uh, there is no proof that it ever is gonna work, basically,
Yeah.
and also there's a bunch of arguments why it wouldn't really even be good, because I honestly don't think that most of those sects have a good democratic sort of are really democratic in the way that you kind of get when you have like smaller organizations. It's very difficult to actually establish a working democratic body, and so most of those organizations that are like trying to establish some sort of alternative are just repeating the same kind of problems and mistakes. And whereas I think you can criticize them all you want. Actually, you should criticize them, but most, or at least some of the parties in the 2 euro parties actually have like structures that you can you can engage in, and you can actually like take part in factional struggles, and you can talk with people and
Yeah.
try to convince them of your politics, and they actually do allow that. Not all of them. Some of them are the Spanish Communist Party, or there's a bunch of parties which aren't really democratic either. But there's, for every Spanish Communist Party, there's Jelinka, for example, which has horrible positions on most things, really. But at the same time, it does allow for
It can be
democratic
contested, it
deliberation.
seems, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, basically, what you have to consider is that you kind of have to have maybe a dialectical point of view, where things aren't just like what they currently are. They're also like they have potential, and they can go in various ways, and you cannot really just treat them as like a monolith that will always stay in one place. And those parties actually do have a lot more dynamism, I would say. So that's where I'm most hopeful, is
Yeah.
talking with comrades from those parties. And I do think that there's a lot of people who are quite receptive, actually, to the message of like forming a European party and then struggling for like European sort of Republican demands. Um, it's just that nobody's really done it as much because, as I said before, there really isn't that much of a focus on European politics. And so, like, when I talk about those things with people, it's usually the response is, "Oh, that's so cool! I've never heard of this concept before," even though it seems kind of obvious.
Yeah. So, I do want to wrap up soon, but
Mhm.
there actually is a really interesting comment here that I want you to respond to before we move on, which is this is the argument that some would make to you, I think, which is the argument on Europe is to be won on a national level within our parties primarily, for any change can be seen on the level of continental coordination. So what would you say to that, basically? What would your response be to that kind of argument?
You cannot win on a national level. I mean, you clearly can't. I mean, you would have to think that what was his name? Alexis Tsipras was like just had a bad soul or whatever. He was just an evil person.
Oh crap! I did not mean to block that person. Sorry.
Oh,
You can keep talking. I some Yay fans are brigading us, and
oh,
I
hello.
Yeah, no, sorry, we're just dealing with dumbasses.
yeah. Okay, you can. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so I really believe that. And also, why would that be better than what I'm arguing for? How would it be easier, or I mean, yeah, I think you should obviously struggle nationally for stuff. I mean, I'm not saying anything to the contrary. I'm just saying that should also be combined with an internationalist struggle for a European republic. And I do think that that kind of if you convince people that a European republic is not only possible but also kind of necessary for the left to do anything, they also usually stop being so reformist, because you immediately have the mindset of like, we're not just struggling for like a list of like individual like random demands for the state. We're also like trying to struggle for power, basically,
Right.
for actual like working class power. And so it just and it's also an argument against reformism in that way, and it's also just touches on so many levels. So I think it's a really good. That's why I'm saying it's something that the European left should really focus on really the most, aside from like day-to-day stuff. It's because it touches on so many things on so many levels, because ultimately it's the main sort of minimum demand. If we're talking about like programmatic politics, it's if you would have like a minimum program today in Europe, it would include establishing a European republic, right? Mm. So I, I I'm yet to see any sort of argument as to why
Yeah.
you should like isolate nationally.
No, absolutely, yeah. I think that's fair. Well, thank you, Amanda. I really appreciate having you on. Hopefully, we can invite you back at some time to get some update on what's going on at the European level. It was very interesting, and we thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for talking about this. I think you're right that people don't talk about this enough, and keep on fighting the good fight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Good luck with everything.
Definitely. Aaron Calvert, if you are still listening, I accidentally blocked you while dealing with some of these Yay fans.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out how to unblock you, so I'm sorry about that. But yes, all right.
I need to I'll be right back, okay?
Yeah, definitely. Hold on. I'm going to figure out how to do this real quick. This is ridiculous. Fuck. So yeah, the other thing I wanted to talk about was like kind of what's going on with Trump and Israel. Have you been seeing that, Joseph? Like,
What specifically? Because he says a lot.
he says a lot, and it's like, you know, I don't want to read too much into it, because with Trump, it's like shit can change within a week, a day, an hour. You
right. I think the last thing that I saw that he proposed for Gaza to be under American administration, which I don't think that's going to happen.
I mean, that's not a good thing at all either. Like, that's not like, I guess it is. That would be a break of U.S. and Israel, I guess, but it wouldn't be like good for Gaza to have it occupied by the U.S.
Oh, absolutely. What are we? Yeah, no, fuck.
But that's what Trump. That's like the last thing that Trump said is his plan is to have Gaza be occupied by the U.S.
Yeah, because the last time the U.S. occupied a nation that it completely fucking destroyed in Iraq, the administration that took over was so great. I don't think people realize this, but basically, what was his name? There was a certain person that Bush put in charge of rebuilding the Iraqi state. Brenner, I think it was his name, or Brennan. I forget. It was some libertarian lunatic.
Brennan, I think.
Yeah, it was some libertarian lunatic. But basically, they just the state, which had been already like the sanctions in the 90s, the first Gulf War and the sanctions in the 90s had taken the most advanced Arab nation and reduced it to nothing, right? And in the process, it's estimated by the UN and others that hundreds of thousands of children starved or suffered severe malnutrition. And of course, when an interviewer asked Madeleine Albright, a putative anti-fascist, Madeleine Albright, whether or not it was worth it, she said, "Oh, absolutely, it was worth it." So anyway, so they had already like severely destroyed the infrastructure and the governing capacity of the Iraqi state. And then they came in and just liquidated whatever was left, and in its place put in this weird libertarian cabal staffed by a bunch of 20-year-old dipshits. And they further just destroyed the country. And now there's basically no functioning state and infrastructure. So yeah, they have a really great track record of destroying nations in the Middle East and rebuilding them, right?
Well, and I feel like if this did happen, it would be like a joint Gulf state project as well.
Anyways, there's so many fucking like guys in the administration who just like on LinkedIn, it says like head executioner at IDF, and then they're like now like just like in whatever state security position in the US, like truly just in no other country could pull this shit off.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna be right. I need to use the bathroom real quick.
Yeah, no problem. Like legit, you'll just like they're not even hiding it. It'll be like lead child torture, like IDF. Like,
well, it's they're either like directly in the government or like in the media, like as correspondents or analysts.
Yeah, it's
without disclosing their like dual nationality.
It's completely fucking dystopian. It's completely dystopian. But yeah, so Donald will be back soon, but what's the hope? Are we gonna
Well, I guess we're talking the rift in MAGA over Israel, the split.
I think that these idiots might be getting, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, there's certain. I mean, there is a lot of chatter. Like, there's a lot of people in the right wing blog, the podcasting world or whatever you want to call it, that are kind of pushing back. But it's always interesting with these types of people because they'll push back for the moment and then completely drop it once the next shift in the agenda is necessary. So like you might have a Nick Fuentes or like a Joe Rogan, and he'll say like, well, what they're doing in Gaza is abhorrent or whatever the hell. And then, once the next pivot comes, they drop it. And then, it's behind the leader.
Well, Nick Fuentes and Joe Rogan are two very different creatures. Joe Rogan is basically just your somewhat apolitical right-wing chud, but he has something like some kind of conscience. Right. And if you just follow even the most biased news about what's going on, you come to the conclusion that they are genociding and slaughtering human beings, including the elderly, women, and children. And if you have something like a conscience left, you say this is not okay. So, of course, like Joe Rogan he's not like some principled Zionist. He has no understanding really of the reasons behind all this, but he can see with his own two eyes that.
Well, it becomes harder and harder to ignore what is.
Yeah, Nick Fuentes is
reality.
Different. Nick Fuentes just hates the Jews and equates Israel with Jews, right? And it's just that simple.
I mean, I
really give a shit about Palestine.
Sure, but I will say though that I think that's always an undercurrent in these discussions, like on the right at least. Like even in Joe Rogan's case, he might not be like the most extreme anti-Semite, but I think it's kind of naive to say that he isn't at least somewhat motivated by it.
I mean, American anti-Semitism.
I wouldn't say Joe Rogan. Maybe some of the people he has on.
Absolutely, yeah.
Maybe some of the people he's on, but I think Joe Rogan. I think he's just like because he has like Barry Weiss and people on. Like I think he's just like disgusted by like
what's going on,
dead children. Like I think he actually like because he's also spoken out against the deportations and stuff. He's disturbed by the deportations as well and how they're handling it, even though he was like for deportations. And like concerned about it.
They always throw their conscience too late, though.
Game. People try to make Joe Rogan to be just like some incorrigible far right agent, but I mean he is right wing, but he's kind of just like malleable. Like you know what I'm saying? Like
I think people should go on his show if they can.
Yeah, I mean there's a reason why he endorsed Bernie Sanders. You know what I'm saying? Like he's just kind of like your average dude that, doesn't really know shit and likes combat sports and has terrible and backwards ideas. But he's not like he's not like Nick Fuentes, like some fucking far right,
I mean, yeah, Nick Fuentes is like a traditionalist Catholic who's like deep in like far right ideology.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
I mean, he's more closer to a Nazi, like an actual Nazi, than Joe Rogan,
straight up.
sure.
Yeah, straight up. So Nick Fuentes is the guy who reads like Gobineau, you know what I'm saying? Like, and is like, oh, this is reasonable stuff, so.
But what do we make of the split though? Like, what do you?
Oh, well, there's a push-pull between, like, because listen, like, contrary to like what people say, like, Israel doesn't control America, nor does America completely control Israel. I think they are countries with different interests but also overlapping interests, and there's politics involved to get them to stay on the same side when those interests slightly diverge in any way. And I think Trump is, he's starting to kind of possibly get a little annoyed with how much Netanyahu is kind of going overboard with how much, because it really was just getting over the top with how much it seemed like the Zionists were basically just kind of controlling Trump. And I felt like maybe he kind of wanted to put more distance between him and them.
Well, yeah, the one thing about Trump is he's a bully, so no one can ever get anything like over him, and I think deep down he really doesn't like the way that Israel tells the American political elite what to do. Quite frankly, I think he doesn't like that somewhere. You know what I'm saying? And going back to the deeper point, which is, what is the relation of the U.S. to Israel? It's complicated. On the one hand, it clearly is a little creature of Western imperialism and Western nationalism. That's a fact historically. Now, for the Americans, it has served as a beachhead for U.S. interests. But now I think it's pretty obvious that Israel also has outsized influence in manipulating and in enforcing its own interests. And it's really starting to, it's very clear in what's happening right now. It is managing to influence the U.S. political elite in ways that are bad for U.S. interests, in the sense that America is highly diplomatically isolated. It was already diplomatically isolated, as evinced by the fact that every single time the UN has a vote on Palestinian sovereignty and on enforcing the pre-1967 agreements as to the two states, it's like the US, Australia, and like
Guam or something.
Canada. Yeah, Canada, like random Pacific island fucking place.
Micronesia.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So, and but now it's like, just on this issue, it's incredibly isolated. They have if America had any diplomatic integrity or just like reputation, it's been shredded to bits.
Could I just add to what you're saying there in terms of, I'm trying to discern like what exactly has been the difference between the last year plus of what's been happening in Gaza and like the last few months of Trump and his, the Israeli policy. To me, it seems like really the big difference has been what you kind of describe as, not to engage in psychologizing or whatever, but it does seem like the big difference is a lot of people kind of pointed out that Trump seemed to be being dragged by the nose by Israel. And I think that upset him in the sense that like he doesn't want to be seen as, well, no one's forcing me to do anything. And so now that's emanating from the right wing, that, Trump is controlled by Israel or whatever, is when he wants to sort of appear like he isn't and put daylight between him and Netanyahu, essentially. But in actual fact, what is he doing? Like, in terms of policy, what is he doing to actually change anything?
Well,
I can't discern any difference.
The first thing is like, let's center what's going on in Gaza right now. After the ceasefire, there's an agreement. I mean, there's always been an attempt at an agreement to allow aid trucks in, right? And before the ceasefire, there was a slow trickle of aid trucks that would go in. Now, Israel would do all kinds of things to stall the entrance of those trucks, saying, oh, these materials can be used for this, that, and this. There's also been extra state action in the sense that settlers and Israeli vigilantes have attacked these aid trucks. But there was a very slow trickle of aid trucks going in. Now, from what I understand, post ceasefire, which is in shreds, by the way, now, but after the Trump ceasefire, is that trickle has slowed down even more. And now there is literally no aid going in, from what I know, which is to say that we are now already, there had been deaths by malnutrition and starvation. But now we're looking at a full-blown campaign of eliminating just full-blown starvation of Palestinians because Israel will not let anything in. It's gotten really, really severe in that way. Israel also completely reneged on the negotiations. You know, one of the phases, they just said, no, we're not doing it until you release all hostages, and Hamas also gives up power. I think, by the way, also Hamas had been signaling that it was willing to basically give up power and allow like Palestinian Authority, Hamas sort of coalition to run Gaza. But it seems like Israel basically just blew up the agreement, and now there's a full assault, and it's just as bad as it was. Having said that, you know, libs love to say, oh, now you see Trump wasn't better, Biden wasn't better. It's kind of moot at this point because Israel basically does whatever the fuck it wants. That's very clear. It doesn't need...
I mean, that's even more so the case with Biden, who apparently did not apply any kind of pressure.
Yeah, there's some, well, you know, we have to be kind of careful. Some Israeli officials claim, and this is probably good evidence for what you just said, but some Israeli officials complain that actually Biden didn't criticize anything and didn't push back against anything, despite the treasonous, despite the lies of an AOC that they're working tirelessly
for a cease.
Disgusting. I spit on her.
You know, we all knew that was a lie when she said it, but to have it confirmed was...
But yeah, there's confirmation that, you know, Israeli officials said they did nothing to push back. Whereas from what I can tell, there's even been public instances where Trump is sort of pushing back, right? So now, how does that affect Israeli actions? Israel knows it can do whatever the fuck it wants, and they're just going to get an endless resupply of materials to slaughter Palestinians with. That's just the truth of it. It doesn't really depend that much on the administration. They're going to do whatever the fuck they want, you know? So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a moot point. Oh, if we had just had fucking Harrison.
I mean, it's the same typical browbeating that the liberals engage in every time after an election.
Yeah, I mean, there's no evidence that we can make an easy prediction that it would have been better. That's the truth of the matter.
It seems like Trump is... It's interesting because it seems like Trump is more willing to let Israel do more heinous things, and he's more willing to do heinous things domestically on behalf of Israel. But he's also more willing to push Israel back. There's more of a push-pull. Right. Whereas with Biden, he's just like the senile guy being like, I guess you're just going to have to... We're just gonna have to give you more weapons to kill more children. Then there's nothing we can really do. Or Trump is like, yeah, we're gonna take over Gaza, man. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great, and we're gonna jail the Palestine protesters. Yeah. Well, Netanyahu's not looking so good. It's not looking so good.
Well, you know, and I think it's kind of it's exactly what you said. It's the paradoxical situation where on the one hand, Trump is completely willing to allow Israel to genocide, but on the other hand, he's willing to push back against Israel. Basically, he wants them to genocide the Palestinians because Trump is okay with it, right? Yeah, I mean, it's very, very difficult to. All we know is just that unless aid gets in, we're going to start hearing about a lot of death from starvation. And there had already been children who had starved to death. which is just, I mean, just let that sink in, but
Yeah.
it's
The
going to
Israeli, it's so disgusting with the Israelis, how they justify. It's like, well, those children who starved already had disabilities and health problems.
Oh yeah,
It's just,
it's like, first off,
who do you think is the first to die in any fucking famine, you scumbags? Like,
yeah, I mean, like, it's a fucking imposed famine, and just because, even if that were the case, it's like, oh, so like
they wouldn't be, they'd be alive today if it weren't for you.
That's a really Korean thing to say.
Yeah, it's also kind of like,
oh, they deserve to
Did they not
die.
hear themselves? Did they not hear themselves?
Oh, they were just sick or whatever. Yeah, but the amount of rational, I mean, so there's basically two routes you can take to rationalize it. One, either it's Hamas' fault, or two, these are subhuman entities, and we can do whatever we want. You know what I'm saying? So both are just cretinous morally, right? But those are the psychological routes you can go without wanting to blow your brains out because you're a demon. So yeah, it's the situation is.
I do want to play this clip from Joe Rogan.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to just be bumming people the fuck out.
Yeah,
but
let's play this clip to kind of.
Any reasonable person would look at Gaza and go, this seems kind of excessive. This seems kind of fucking crazy.
Right.
It seems kind of crazy that 70,000 people or whatever it is are dead, including women and children.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is the only way to do it? Really? Yeah. Any reasonable person, that doesn't make you anti-Semitic. It doesn't make you pro-Hamas. Like, no, it
could be pro-human.
Yeah, human beings.
I don't think humans should be murdered.
Yeah. Just like, that sounds so reasonable. But the thing is, like, we never got into that. Yeah. Because the conversation, tactically, he entered into the conversation as, because he doesn't have really a defensible position. Mm-hmm. It's very hard to say this is the only way to do it.
Yeah.
So what do you say? You say, you need better experts. You shouldn't be talking to this person. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. Like, why don't you have this? You've never been there. You should go. Like, I am not going there. What the fuck are you talking about? Any reasonable person.
What can be done with the country?
Hold on, I want to. He's talking about that Douglas Murray guy who he was just so bad.
Yeah. No, I love the whole standpoint epistemology he took. He's like, well, you can't talk about it if you don't go there. Isn't it like what you guys have been bitching about with like wokeness, like that that you can't comment on anything unless you're from a certain place or have a certain experience. It's just
well, the thing is, I don't think that their critique of wokeness like went to that level, like the level that we would critique like identity politics and stuff. Like they don't even like think about it like to that level. They just are like, SJW's cringe.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. We're going to be engaging in the analytical point, which is that it's a fallacy to suggest that you can't talk about a social phenomenon unless you've participated in that social.
Then no one could ever speak ever.
We
would have nothing to say.
You know what I'm saying? You couldn't talk about your past in a way, right? Because you're not participating in it right now. Basically, you can look at what you see in a millisecond and say that's it, and it's done.
The other thing I'll say about the Joe Rogan clip, though, is that as much as I want to applaud his progress on this issue, like it kind of bugged me out the way he was like, well, it's reasonable, it's not a reasonable position. It wasn't reasonable over a year ago either. Like,
but he's a stupid. He's a dum-dum. You think that he knows about the history of Palestine? He doesn't know. People don't know.
Yeah, but I take him to task because he's sort of responsible for laundering that position, and at least initially.
I don't know what the hell he had said in the past about Palestine, but listen, the default take that Americans have before this event is that Palestinians are terrorists, and they've peddled this since the 70s, basically, right? Like, which is when Palestine came into American consciousness, because before then they didn't know what the hell a Palestinian was, if they did. If they do now. So that was the default take. He probably just had that take. He probably just suffered from that prejudice.
I mean, he had people like Barry Weiss coming on his show and just like mouthing off like Zionist bullshit, like
and that take is despicable. But it generally dissolves when people actually come to learn the history, right, and are confronted with the experience of Palestinians. It's a shitty idea. A ton of people have shitty ideas. And you just have to believe somewhere that if you talk to them and if you reason and if you present them with the evidence, that at least some of them will change their ideas. And I think that's kind of what's happening right now.
I definitely believe that. I just don't know how far I'm willing to believe.
Well, I will say, like, Rogan, like, he did actually listen to this podcast about the history of Palestine. And I think it did kind of change his views.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
so I think there's that going on. But this is one thing I found from an Israeli source. Says after the independence, so there was the ceasefire agreement with the Houthis. And then there's the waiving of the demand for normalization with Saudi Arabia. And then I guess there's a report that the U.S. is waiving a demand for Hamas to disarm before reaching a ceasefire. But there was another claim by the Jerusalem Post, which I don't actually believe.
Imagine that as a negotiation stance in a war. You guys have to give up your fucking arms before we talk. It's like,
before we negotiate. It's like,
that's not a negotiation demand. That's a showstopper. If you say that, you're not negotiating it. You're not negotiating in good faith.
Yeah. Well, the Israelis don't negotiate in good faith.
No, of course not. We all know that. But I just love how like transparently they're like, we're not negotiating.
One of the conditions to negotiate is to allow us to kill you.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Like, just have no military. In a negotiation between military forces, a demand cannot be you can't have a military.
Like, well, that's basically the story of Oslo. Is in order for us to recognize like you as a legitimate nation, you have to basically like surrender any like claim to sovereignty.
Yeah, no, and
but now there's this claim from the Jerusalem Post by the Gulf diplomatic source says that Trump is going to declare a Palestinian state and have America recognize it.
Sure.
Yeah, and I don't buy this, but
I got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you.
Yeah, but it's just, it's interesting. And then there's this other guy, I couldn't find it, but he's claiming, like, I think he's like a Nick Fuentes line, the guy who's just like spreading fake news that Trump is trying to purge AIPAC from the administration. So, but why is the Jerusalem Post like, putting this out? Like, what? This is just weird to me.
Dude, it's bullshit.
Some guy asking Grok AI, is this true?
Yeah, is this true? Let's see what Grok says. The claim about Trump recognizing a Palestinian state without Hamas is unconfirmed, based on a single diplomatic source with no official U.S. statement as of May 10th, 2025.
Wait, what is
Trump
that?
has proposed a controversial plan to take over Gaza and relocate Palestinians. So yeah, I think his actual plan, as he has said, is to take over Gaza directly, basically.
Yeah, but how is that gonna fucking what the fuck?
Which is that's not a serious plan either. But
I don't think these guys have a coherent policy on Israel.
Yeah, no, they don't. I think like their policy was like, we're gonna work with Netanyahu because he's our guy. He's awesome. He's a nationalist, just like us. But
they're starting but Trump is starting to understand that he's a piece of shit and annoying as fuck.
And that the Israelis are starting to get in the way of U.S. interests because
they are. They really are.
They're starting to get in the way of the Gulf states and in relations with the Gulf states.
Yeah, and Saudi Arabia, another American basically puppet state, is saying that it refuses to normalize relations with Israel until I think that they declared there's a Palestinian state.
That's interesting because under Biden, they had actually committed to normalize relationships with Israel.
Well, I think before,
but then after October 7th and everything, they changed their mind, basically.
Listen, also, people have to understand that there's been a de facto normalization.
Yes.
The Israeli state by the various Arab nations.
Yeah, it's kind of just like it's almost it's not, the normalization is essentially in deed, but only not in name.
Minus, I'll have to say, Algeria.
Of course, you got to keep saying, got to rep Algeria.
Although there is something really troubling that I read recently about the case of Algeria, and it's not just it's indicative of a wider trend, which is that the Algerian state started cracking down on solidarity protests for Palestine. Yeah, it's concerning. And what they said was, why would you protest? We're diplomatically one of the most aggressive entities against Israel. But it's very clear why they're doing that, because the struggle for Palestine is seen as a threat by the ruling elite. It's people getting active. It's people organizing.
No, I mean, it's like, well, we've got to keep the pressure up to keep you guys doing that stuff, you know.
Yeah, and
we can't let you guys get complacent.
But you know, I
we
think
got to keep doing more.
I think beyond that, you know, I mean, the Algerian people should demonstrate.
Of course.
But they're afraid that it precisely will just have people start raising questions about the government itself.
Yeah.
And that's true of all the Arab states. They
Exactly.
see the struggle for Palestinian independence as robust civil society, and that scares them, because it's people getting organized and mobilized. Yeah, no, the Israelis fucking hate Algeria. They fucking hate the Algerian state, because Algeria is always pushing resolutions that the Israelis just hate. But obviously it's not perfect, as I was just saying. They're not even allowing their own people to, you know, and they were pointing to Morocco and saying, look, in Morocco, they're allowing us to fucking demonstrate for the Palestinians. It's a real contradiction in that way, because Morocco has de jure recognized the existence of Israel, because in 2000, I forget when, it was during the first Trump administration, Trump made a quid pro quo with Morocco, saying, if you recognize the existence of Israel, we will recognize your claim on the Western Sahara. So it's, first off, that quid pro quo, it is levels of, like, it's just like a complete and flagrant violation of international law. Right. So the UN has declared that Morocco does not have sovereignty over the Western Sahara, that the Western Saharan people have a claim for national self-determination. And of course, the recognition of Israel would mean the recognition of Israel in its borders today, which would also be in violation of international law. So it's just like, America does not give a fuck about international law. I mean, that's very obvious. Like, everyone's known that, but it's just like incredible what they get away with.
Yeah.
And then
I mean, the whole post-war,
and then they browbeat everyone else about, like, China doesn't respect IP. China doesn't respect. You don't respect anything. You don't respect anything. Like, international law is nothing but a game for you motherfuckers to use to further your interests.
Yeah, and that's become completely obvious. But I think, you know, and this kind of leads into our next topic that I want to touch on before we got like maybe 20 minutes left. But because it does seem like this kind of post-war order, ideologically, economically, politically, is kind of fracturing. And just last week, the probably the most famous rapper in the world, Kanye West / Ye, released a very horrible song. I think it's some people were defending the beat, saying, "Oh, the beat's kind of a return to like the my dark, beautiful, twisted fantasy years," but I think it's just sounds like an AI parody of that stuff, and the chorus is just I don't think we could get away with playing it. I don't even want to play it on here.
No, it's a dog shit song.
Yeah, it's pretty.
If you're listening, you probably already have heard it. It's not hard to find if you want to hear it. It's not on the streaming services, but it's a pro-Hitler song. It's very directly pro-Hitler.
God damn, bro.
Very catchy, though. I hate to say it. Like,
remind us, what race is Kanye West?
Kanye West is a black man. And let's remind our audience that he had a song called Black Skinhead in 2014. That is honestly a banger. Yeah, I think it's a great song. I think that album, Yeezus, is fucking awesome.
My favorite album, honestly.
Yeah, it's my favorite Kanye. It's the one that I go back to if I listen to Kanye, which I don't really do that much anymore, but
yeah, I mean, it's incredible that like he would ever he's clearly has no self-respect because the number of heinous things that Hitler has said about black people, they're literally at the bottom of his racial hierarchy. So he sees you as subhuman, way to just like be cucked by that. What an idiot! Like,
well, look, Kanye in the song, because it starts out saying, he says, "I'm a cuck," literally, like I'm literally a cuck. I'm addicted to nitrous, and I can't see my wife and kids anymore.
So he's just like a loser.
Yeah, but Aaron I was able to get Aaron Cowper back in the chat. By the way, I figured it out.
Good,
but
good to have you back.
Banger. I don't think it's a banger. I can't even give it that. I can't even give it that.
It's a laundry list of why ACS won't let you see your kids, dude. Like, why are you putting that on record?
But
it's so.
But it's like, yeah, it's a laundry list of why
why Child Protective Services is
so he basically says, listen, I'm a fuck up, I'm a terrible person, I suck at life, but I'm gonna declare war on human decency. I'm gonna declare war on because there is this post-war moral consensus from the extreme left, from the most far left Stalinist to the centrist, to except for the extreme far right, pretty much everyone in the whole political spectrum post-war agrees that Hitler is bad. Like from George W. Bush to Fidel Castro, everyone agreed that Nazism is evil and Hitler is the bad guy that we all had to unite to stop.
Well, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, in places like Germany, that consensus is actually not as
rock solid as you may expect.
Really not. I mean, that's
why is it even rock solid here either? Like,
well, I mean, listen, there is of course the post-war Nazis that we bring in, and obviously the narrative has cracks in it. There's always been the cracks. There's of course the genocidal wars waged in Vietnam and all throughout the Cold War.
But the other thing is like, there's always been that consensus has always been tenuous insofar as there's been anti-communism, right? Because that's what in the 90s there was like the historians' war kind of, where people like Nolte were saying, we're saying that, well, maybe Hitler's not so bad because he was just reacting to Stalin.
Right. There's an attempt to relativize Hitler from fairly mainstream and respectable historians as like a reaction to the real evils of Bolshevism, and say, well, Hitler was evil, he was bad, but in the end, like, what do you expect when something as terrible as Bolshevism? It was kind of like a tit for tat.
That is the most common line. I mean, you see it still everywhere. Oh, but Stalin was worse, right? So that consensus has always been fragile, to be honest. Of course, Ye is not.
I don't think Ye's reading Nolte.
Yeah, exactly. let's say that, like, in polite society, yes, Hitler is the embodiment of evil. He's
and I think even like people like Pat Buchanan and these historical revisionists, they'd still have to like condemn Hitler and acknowledge the Holocaust.
So insofar as like Ye's a loser and a total contrarian, of course he's gonna say Hail Hitler. It's literally just to piss people off and get attention. That's like my real feeling about it.
That's basically my take, is that he's just such an extreme contrarian. He's become a Nazi through that contrarianism. But the ironic part about his Nazi contrarianism is that it's actually not contrarian anymore. It's becoming more and more of a mainstream position. So he's not the contrarian he thinks he is at this point. He's just an edgy loser.
Yeah, but remember, it's in quote unquote polite society. In the circles that he used to frequent, that is like, you can't say that shit.
I get what you're saying, but it's also breaking apart, like, especially with who's in the administration and the political forces that have been empowered. And people are a lot more public now about being Nazis. Like, or anti-Semitism in general is a much more common phenomenon than it was 5 years ago, for example.
Yeah. That's great news.
Yeah, right. Actually, this is my friend made a pretty funny tweet.
It is, you know.
There's nothing transgressive about singing "Hail Hitler." The U.S. government is about to suspend habeas corpus forever.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, listen, like this is, this stuff is like, I guess it is like transgressive in like the most cheapest like surface like level. Like, yeah, like, you're not supposed to say that, but
Yeah, but like it doesn't, I mean,
but in a way, it is aligning with the values of our current ruling class, which is to transgress like any kind of semblance of democratic liberal freedoms.
yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, fascists never fundamentally challenged capitalist property relations. Fascists upheld racial hierarchies. Fascists upheld gender hierarchies. Of course, they did all of these things in an extreme form, and their modus operandi was to just tear up whatever semblance of democratic norm. But it's just an extreme form of all of the things that the American ruling class believes and that America was built on. It's not fucking transgressive. You know what I'm saying?
But but they are like, fascists are obsessed with being transgressive because they feel like that they're the true rebels, that they're the ones who are like you've been watching the Mussolini series, right? Yeah. So
one of the things that it's something that keeps getting repeated in the first off, excellent show.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about it more on this stream because I think there's a lot to go with.
Yeah, because I've been reading right now The Apprentice's Sorcerer, and it's about sort of the contradictions of fascist ideology. And whoever made that show has actually like a good sense about fascist ideology.
I thought so too.
Yeah, and doesn't just repeat kind of the liberal mystification of the content of fascist ideology. But there is something that was said in the show. I kind of want to say it, I'm going to fuck it up in Italian. It's like el fascismo es tutto e niente. Fascism is like everything and nothing, right? It's against everything and it's against nothing, right? And I think that kind of like nihilism, there is a deep nihilism that permeates fascism, which is, I think that's maybe something that like Kanye's converging on too. He's like, my life sucks. Everything's falling apart. Everyone fucking hates me. So fuck the world. Fuck everything. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but he's also like, there's also this will to power. He's like, I am the greatest. Everyone hates me, is out to get me, but I'm the greatest, and I'm gonna conquer the world like by going up against everyone. Because I'm the greatest rapper alive, and I've made the greatest music ever, and the world is up against me because I've dared to like speak the truth, and and he's and. Like I do think like he is like genuinely like hates Jews because like he maybe had some bad experiences with Jewish people in the music industry maybe, and is like raging out against them in that way.
It's not the first time that a successful black musician has raged. I mean, like, think about just like Ice Cube's diss against like NWA. I mean, it's just like filled with like
I mean,
you know what that reminds me of? Like, you remember that scene in The Sopranos with Hesh and the rapper? That's what that always reminds me of.
Yeah, that's like the literal best, like just the best example of like the spontaneous roots of anti-Semitism amongst black musicians.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot we can say about like black-Jewish relationships, especially in the music industry, and
it's bad. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah.
I mean, like,
and Kanye seems to have been like mistreated by this doctor who got him hooked on nitrous, and there just seems to be a lot of really weird personal stuff that went down with him, where his mental facilities have been degraded, or he's just kind of lost the plot, and so and then he's hanging out with Nick Fuentes. Like he is friends with Nick Fuentes. They hang out, and Nick Fuentes is just like
what an odd blunt rotation, dude.
I know, because Nick Fuentes hates black people. I mean, he speaks out against. He's pretty racist, but
he's extremely racist.
Yeah, he's extremely racist. Yeah, he's extremely racist. But he does like Nick Fuentes will say like, well, we gotta work with black people against the Jews, and like he will like go against his like followers for being like too racist against black people if it gets in the way of like teaming up with them against like
I just like it's something worth looking into more, but like the American roots of anti-Semitism, because in a place like Germany, anti-Semitism runs deep. Like
Yeah.
medieval.
they were pogroming Jews in the 12th century. You know what I'm saying? Like anti-Semitism runs deep in Germany, but in the U.S., evidently, because it's a younger nation, like there's a different history to anti-Semitism.
Yeah, no, Jews were just like another European ethnic group that
Well,
were
there is
not
one thing.
Anglo-Saxon.
There is one thing: clan ideology, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like they were just a non-Anglo-European ethnic group that were just like Italians or Irish
But
or Slav.
if you're also like a hardcore Protestant or Christian, I mean, it wasn't until Vatican II that
That's what I'm saying.
like before Vatican II, the Jews killed Jesus, right?
Right.
Like, according to the Catholic Church, and so like there had always been that, like even in the U.S. they had imported that enmity towards the Jews as Jesus murderers or whatever, right? So like Americans anti-Semitism has its it imports, but it has its own history. It's worth looking more into that.
Yeah, I do kind of see American anti-Semitism as more related to like Anglo enmity towards non-Anglo immigrant groups from Europe.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean,
and I think that Jews largely integrated into white America in the same way that those other European immigrant groups integrated into white America. But I do think you're right, though, that the Catholic kind of aspect does complicate it because those other groups were largely like Catholic and stuff. So, but,
yeah, so it's kind of weird because like the most powerful forms of anti-Semitism in the literal sense of like the most powerful people who were anti-Semites were like hardcore Protestants,
right? The wasps,
right?
Who detested.
But I will say, like, one difference between,
but also
one difference between American Jews and other immigrant groups that they had in common with the Irish is that they didn't plan on returning home usually when they came here.
Yeah.
Irish didn't plan on returning home either because they were usually leaving very desperate economic situation. Jews were usually fleeing pogroms, so they obviously weren't planning on returning home. So Jews and Irish tended to be more into building up their economic foundations within the United States rather than sending remittance home. So yeah, there's that factor. But so yeah, that's I feel like that's kind of how you would want to start trying to understand American anti-Semitism, in my opinion, at least. But
so yeah, now we have fucking Kanye stepping in.
Yeah, I feel like now we're just like it's this very postmodern kind of thing where Hitler is totally removed from its historical context within European racialism and is just like this kind of avatar of like Kanye's revenge fantasy against the Jews who wronged him, and is also like kind of like a symbol, like the powerful man that Kanye is, and it's
really weird, dude. It's
really fucking weird, and I don't.
Really weird, man.
The reason I call it a psyop is because there are various conspiracy theories.
Yeah, let's get into this.
Yeah, let's have your, because just to alert our viewers.
Well, no, I mean, I could kind of bring up some of the conspiracy theories I've seen, but I just kind of see it as like a psyop in the sense as that like he's taking this really catchy beat and these really kind of like repetitive lyrics and just like trying to create a brain worm that's like being forced into the public to like make them like hypnotized into like repeating Hail Hitler over and over again.
Yeah, I mean,
so by the end of the month, they're gonna have like buses full of frat boys like singing Hail Hitler. Last night I was downtown and I heard a Kanye song, and the first thing when I hear Kanye's voice is, oh no, is it gonna be that song? Is it gonna be that song? Like it gets me on edge,
Like you sent me that video of like those like hype beast like skater bros like blasting fucking Hail Hitler and Washington.
I don't want to play it on the stream because
no, hell no, don't play that.
I don't want to go. Well, I'll send it to you. After the stream.
Like out of my own interest, I've been going to the Kanye subreddit to see like what the discourse is, and they are split. Like they are pretty split. There's I think a solid half of them that are like, well, I like this. This is good. I and then there's another half of them that are like, this is disgusting or whatever. So if it's a psyop, it's at least working for part of people. And then what I'll say is that maybe psyop is too strong a word to use, but what I will say is that I could definitely see it being the case that he was goaded into making this shit by like Nick Fuentes, for example. Like Nick Fuentes probably told him like, it'd be really cool, if you diss the Jews on a track, and you did Hail Hitler, I
Oh,
could
hell yeah.
totally see that being the case.
Yeah, I could see that too. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
okay, so Donald and I had a bit of a debate, like whether or not we should talk about this stuff, but we obviously none of us believe that we have like definitive evidence. None of us believe that, but there's some suggestions from others, and it needs to be investigated much more, that Kanye is actually being more or less blackmailed into doing this shit. Once again, I have to repeat, this is not, I don't know enough. There's not enough.
Yeah. So there's this guy, Power Mapping. He does like kind of parapolitics, conspiracy research on stuff, and he has a few threads on Ye that he's done. Says there's a non-zero chance Ye's Nazi rant is a byproduct of his MKing, which occurred when his personal trainer, a nutritional scientist who once conducted drug studies for the Canadian Department of National Defense, and Dr. Farzam, Drake's Ozempic, possibly treated Diddy's ex Kim Porter circa her death, had him stretched out on Pasternak's home for erratic behavior in 2016. Pasternak had supposedly since threatened to have Ye reinstitutionalized in response to anti-Semitic comments, text which Ye leaked. So there's just, there's some weird shit with people he has connections to. This guy's saying, could it be that Kanye's incoherent Nazi pronouncements are half tolerated in Hollywood and various industries because he plays a critical performative role as the embodiment of a resurgent Nazism in pop culture so as to justify the continuing existence of the state of Israel? This was before the HH song came out.
No, but that is actually, I think, the most important thing to quote unquote take out of this, which is that functionally, Kanye is going to justify the heinous crimes of Israel.
Yeah.
Because the Israeli establishment will be able to point to him and say, look, Hitlerism and Nazism is on the rise. And so you need to support us because we're the bulwark against this. So ironically enough, if like Kanye was hoping to like, I don't know what he was hoping to do, but he's justifying.
So the idea here is that Kanye was like submitted through some MK Ultra type procedure where they addled his mind on drugs in order to make him a puppet. I guess to normalize anti-Semitic thinking so that you can justify the state of Israel.
Yeah, which is it's a lot of leaps there, obviously.
Yeah, there's a lot of leaps. I think it's more likely that he just got addicted to shit. It fried his brain.
Right.
Now he's
and there's this sus dentist guy who got him purposely addicted to nitrous. It is really weird because that guy
that is strange.
But like a lot of doctors get their clients hooked on shit because they make money off of it. That's like a lot of the reason we had an opioid
this Milo guy, he claims that the nitrous guy got him addicted and then wanted to hire a hitman against Milo as retaliation for speaking out about it. But then there was this other thing. Hold on, let me bring the other thing up.
Where did we go wrong on this timeline?
Yeah, there's just a lot of really weird stuff, and I'm not sure if you can really there's not much you can very definitively conclude.
What's it called
about this?
Our comrade Donald is like a doctor of paranoid conspiracy.
I always love listening to this from conspiracy that I've never heard of.
You can't let it you can't be too paranoid. You can't take it too face value. But it's interesting to look into this kind of stuff. But yeah, this other things I guess this Zionist guy Kevin Blott. He's claiming that he had a sex tape of Ye from 2012 and that he's holding on to it and that he's got compromise on Ye, and so so it kind of makes you think, well, are there people who have stuff on him who are trying
release the tapes. Release the tapes.
Yeah, dude. Apparently he has lip dick.
Release
the tapes.
I think in this case,
It's so fucked up, bro. We're in the worst timeline ever.
Yeah, it's very,
What
because people, have all kinds of weird connections to people, and I think in this case it's probably Nick Fuentes and some of those people who are pushing him in this direction. And some people think Nick Fuentes himself is a Fed because he mysteriously never really caught charges for January 6th, even though he was like there commanding people to charge on the Capitol.
Huh.
Like there's a video literally of him like with a megaphone being like, "March on the Capitol, take charge into the Capitol, occupy the Capitol now."
There's
like
no
all these,
possible deniability. Yeah, no, I was just there. Like,
yeah. So listen, and but I think like functionally, like this does like help Zionism because it's creating this impression that the world isn't safe for Jews, and so we all need to go to Israel. And Ye, whenever he's asked about Palestine, he's like, "I don't give a shit about Palestine. Like I don't care at all about that."
yeah, wow, that's okay. Well, at least he's clear on that. Good.
Yeah, so it's in a way, I'm almost glad that he says that because it's like at least
Right.
like
course.
Hitler isn't associated with Free Palestine.
Yeah, no, you don't want anything to do.
Not like it's gonna stop anybody, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
Because I mean, like Nick Fuentes actually is like pretty pro-Palestine and will like give like very emotional like speeches about children dying in Gaza and stuff. Like, but Kanye doesn't really seem to give a shit.
He denies the Holocaust, so like, what the fuck? Like, are you gonna fucking?
Yeah, I guess that's why he denies it because he doesn't want to face the horrors of what happened.
But what I don't get is also like racists like him hate Arabs, so it's like, what do they like? What is he?
Yeah,
doing?
I don't know.
All just it's for him. It's all just fucking crocodile.
Well, no, because he'll be like, "Well, I'm a Catholic in the end. Like, I am racist, but I'm also a Catholic. So I have to love everyone."
Yeah.
So it's just stupid and
yeah, whatever.
World's going to shit. I'm not excited about the cultural effects of this stuff. I'm not excited about,
I mean, dude, we just had a bunch of dumbass hype beasts like on our.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. I actually can't believe those guys didn't get like punched out. In the middle of
no.
Washington Square Park.
Oh, I would have. Oh man. No, but yeah, no, just like these. No, but even in our chat, we just had these dumbass hype beasts, like just
yeah.
The kinds
I was able to keep them from coming in by like censoring the yay in the titles. You notice that? I like
smart, dude. That's like when a pilot does like evasive maneuvers.
Yeah, I did like an evasive maneuver.
It's a basic pilot shit, dude.
Yeah, it's just stupid that I have to do that. I mean, I guess there are like dedicated fans of this guy who just like
go to that Ye subreddit. They are insane.
Oh, they're insane.
They're absolutely insane.
Yeah, no, they're crazy. But yeah, they should like, what's it called? I mean, we're gonna have to get like more used to this, having just absolute lunatics just troll and bomb our chat. It's an inevitable consequence of, inshallah, we'll get more.
No, we gotta be able to. We gotta use it to make like to make the stuff more interesting.
Use it for content.
We can mock them, I think, is the way.
Point and laugh.
Well, like last time, it kind of triggered like an interesting discussion about anti-Semitism because of that one guy.
I mean, kind of, yeah. The problem there is that the problem with people just being like dumb as fuck and racist is we're gonna get in trouble. You know what I'm saying? Like literally because of YouTube.
Right.
We're gonna get flagged and like taken down because of these.
Yeah.
People. And that's something that I'm a bit more worried about. The other thing is like you can't really like debate these people, like those idiots with Ye. Like you can't. You'll be like,
they're just there to stand their like celebrity and
yeah, exactly. Like
I mean, the anti-Semite from last week that just seemed like mental illness. You can't.
No, yeah. Well, that's fair.
Well, it's like they're trying to do like a consistent atheism thing, but like
it was more like this weird, like edgy atheist position of like, well, I'm anti-Semitic because like I also don't like I'm anti-Christian and anti-Buddha and anti-whatever, and
not quite the same thing, pal.
Yeah, it sort of falls flat on its face. Like exactly. It's not the same thing at all. But so we're gonna have to. You're gonna be victims of our own success. But yeah, no. I mean, maybe we should wrap it up soon.
Yeah, no, I think yeah.
Do you have any? Do you have a funny? Can we end on a funny video? Do we have any funny videos?
Let me see.
We need to try to uplift. We need to all be uplifted.
Do we have an explanation as to why Kanye is like positively embracing the title of cuck? Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, I guess it's another like, oh damn, look how fucking
Is being a cuck cool now?
well, yeah, I think it's kind of like
People
another
do now?
transgressive thing. I don't know. I don't fucking know.
I don't know. I think it's like I don't get it because the alt-right
I'm
always
flabbergasted, bro.
I think
You
it's
know?
okay if you don't get it, dog. I don't think.
Yeah, I don't. I
Hey,
don't
if it
know.
works for you,
Yeah, no, it doesn't really fit in with like the Nietzschean like vitalism. Like I'm the greatest, I'm the king. Like you know,
It does fit in with Nietzsche as a historical personality.
yeah, it does. Yeah,
I'll say that.
Damn, we are really pulling a Zizek right now, like bringing Ye and Nietzsche into the same.
When you see the cook is the ultimate transgressive.
Yeah, maybe,
exactly.
maybe that's the point, is to just be transgressive. He thinks it's like kind of transgressive.
Where is the cocaine?
Yeah, but like, isn't the whole like transgressive thing supposed to be that like you're an alpha male, like not a cuck, like not a beta male? Like, I don't know.
Well, the most alpha thing to be now is a cuck. You see,
Yeah.
surrendering that is actually the most.
Yeah,
alpha
it was
thing
like
to
those
do.
guys who were like the ultimate like liking women is gay. Like that was another like they took another big L there with the whole.
That's a Nick Fuentes thing. Yeah, Nick Fuentes says stuff like that.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Well, the picture of Nick Fuentes for me is becoming clearer and clearer.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, everyone calls Nick Fuentes gay.
yeah. I mean, he would be a disgrace to gay people if that were the case. But
I mean, they have Milo Yiannopoulos and
oh yeah, Milo Yabadabadoo, yeah.
yeah, but Napadu.
That's yeah. Oh, God. That guy disappeared. Thank God.
Yeah, no, he's still around, but he's like, yeah, he's kind of like just like gossipy guy who just like spreads gossip about like various right wing guys.
Oh
And,
wow, he's like, damn, that's good.
So it's actually kind of funny to follow him because he's just like, it's like, yeah, I got dirt on Charlie Kirk. He likes to get his dick sucked. I don't know if he actually said something like that, but like that's the kind of stuff that he just.
Oh
talks
yeah,
about.
spread that libel, dog. About Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, but yeah, he was like talking about the Yay song and how it's like this brilliant like transgressive like thing, and how like you know, he found like the one way that you can like still piss people off and stuff. And
I mean, you're definitely gonna piss people off.
yeah. Well, it's like I said, it's kind of breaking the consensus of the post-war order, which is like what like there was this obscure like fringe leftcom group in France in like the 1970s and early 80s that like got into Holocaust denialism because they had this bizarre theory that like the whole like post-war order that like unified like liberals and like the official communist like Stalinist parties was that like Nazism was like a unique evil. And so they thought that if you could like disprove the Holocaust or whatever, that like it would disprove like anti-fascism and would disprove like the whole kind of popular front mythology. And so then communism could succeed. And you know, so they were like crazy, like leftcom ultra leftist, like situationist types. But in a way, like I feel like Ye kind of accomplished what they couldn't accomplish.
Yeah.
Left communism is sort of like the Marxist politics equivalent of getting into meth. Getting to stuff meth.
It's very yeah, I mean the amount of leaps that you just made in that reasoning process is unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it's an insane reasoning process.
You're doing somersaults there, but
France in the 1970s, I guess, a lot of crazy thinking going on.
Yeah, they're really well. Yeah, that's it's the French
between all of the tendencies.
Yeah. So, can you find anything?
I'm bad at finding stuff on the fly.
We need a funny video. I just need to be uplifted because I can't leave like depressed as hell.
Sorry, we can be bummers.
Yeah, we're real bum. We need to have some funny content too. You know what? Fuck it. Let's just summarize what we did and wrap it up.
Right. So yeah, no, I think we learned quite a bit about Europe and what's going on with the left there, which is pretty frustrating, honestly.
Yeah.
Basically, seems like they're starting from scratch.
There's also a continuing debate as to the importance of the international versus the national struggle.
Right.
It's it's a continuous debate in the amongst communists. It has been, it always will be, I suspect. Seems like a rather abstract debate taken just, writ large. Looking at things case by case sometimes helps. Like, what would a left European party look like in the various different nations? I have no idea. We talked about the MAGA split in over Palestine and the conduct of Israel, from which we concluded that basically honestly, yeah, now the Israelis are alienating the far right, which is saying something by their conduct.
Yeah. But I say let's be cautious about making too far of
some elements of the far right.
But yeah, it's a push and pull. It's the push and pull is happening. Whoa, news I just saw: Hamas in direct ceasefire talks with the U.S.
Yeah,
A Hamas leader, quote unquote, told Al Jazeera Arabic on Sunday, this is Dropside News, that the movement is engaged in direct and advanced negotiations with the U.S. administration over a Gaza ceasefire. So, yeah, I think the U.S. is trying to show who's really in charge in the relationship. I think that's kind of what's going on here.
I think this is more about showing who's boss.
Yeah, it's about showing who's boss.
Yeah.
And Israel's going to try to push back, and it's a push and pull. That's really what's going on here, I think. I don't think it's a split with Israel. I don't think Trump is going to break with Israel. I think this is negotiating the proxy relationship, I think.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, thank you for joining Cosmo Stream. Check out Cosmonaut magazine. Just type that into Google. You'll find us. We have a Patreon. Subscribe to our Patreon if you can. Give a few bucks if you can.
I got someone to subscribe to our Patreon at the wedding last night.
Oh, awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, this is Cosmo Stream. Please share this with your friends, trying to make it a thing. We know that it's an important form of media. So, thank you for joining us, and have a nice Sunday.
Have a good Mother's Day.
Yeah, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers.
Happy Mother's Day, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.